All right, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from RicoScores. Last night / early this morning, I gave y'all a lot of the defensive free agents that may be available from other NFL teams that we brought in front office and coaching staff members from. So we talked about why those could be some very likely free agents that we target at positions of need. I'm gonna do an offensive version of that later on today / this evening / night. Of course, the legal tampering period starts tomorrow, but as of right now, I'm updating y'all on everything that I'm hearing concerning the Washington Commanders with this legal tampering period right now. First of all, the Washington Commanders are predicted to land a pretty big time Ravens linebacker that may get top linebacker money in free agency. Also, a Texans edge rusher is available, and I'm very excited about that. Also, could the Commanders end up trading for a Cowboys wide receiver that has now been made available? Also, Washington backup quarterback potentially leaving, and Adam Peters did miss on a 49ers free agent that the Washington Commanders were reportedly interested in. And we are finally free from the Ron Rivera curse. I'm going to explain how, but before we do, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned for all of the content. Again, just did a defensive free agent targets that we should be looking for just last night, early this morning. About to do the offensive version of that. And make sure y'all stay tuned because I'm going to keep y'all updated on every little thing that the Commanders are doing throughout this whole process. Whether it's a rumor, a report, a pure fact, a guy that we signed, whatever. We trade a guy, we re-sign a guy. Whatever happens, I'm keeping y'all updated on every little minute thing. Even if it's like a super duper backup corner, I'm going to keep y'all updated. So this is your one-stop shop for everything Commanders. Let's go ahead and get to this video right now, though. Let's get it. All right, so first of all, according to CBS Sports, the Commanders are predicted to land Ravens linebacker Patrick Queen. They said in the article, quote, Quinn certainly realized the importance of having a strong inside linebacker to negate a team's run game after the way Aaron Jones brutalized his defense in the NFC wildcard round, unquote. And man, one of the best traits you can have out here in any line of work is adaptability. And if you're this elite at creating turnovers like the Cowboys have done, they literally have been the best takeover defense in the NFL over the past 3 seasons. They've been really good at getting pressure on the quarterback, most notably because of Micah Parsons, but you can also throw a few other guys in there like Dorrance Armstrong and Lawrence and all of those guys. But whoo-wee, those Green Bay Packers exposed that weakness in the middle of their defense, in the heart of their defense. And I'm pretty sure Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. are going to be like, how can we avoid what happened last year? And probably the biggest culprit was not having at least a very good inside linebacker. Micah Parsons can be a really good Mike linebacker if you need him to be, but he's so valuable as a pass rusher, and that's more valuable than being a Mike linebacker. So any play that you don't have Micah Parsons going after the quarterback, it feels like you're losing value right there. You're not giving him the best chance to be as impactful on the game as you can. I love the fact that they mix it up with him. I hope we do something very similar with Jamin Davis, like I've already talked about in the previous video. I think Jamin Davis is going to be in coverage and play Mike linebacker more than a Micah Parsons would, but I feel like they are both guys that could do like a healthy blend of both. But man, it showed that Dan Quinn needs a true instinctual run stuffing, not afraid to deal with guards and tackles, pulling guards especially, ready to mix it up with anybody, do his dirt in traffic type of Mike linebacker. Is Patrick Queen that guy? That's a good question. Before we get there, though, his market value right now, according to Spot Track, they're saying that he's potentially going to get an $18.5 million per year contract. They're predicting something like 5 years, $92.642 million, which would make him the third highest paid linebacker in the NFL. The 73rd highest paid player, period. But linebacker wise, that would take him from his rookie contract of being the 25th highest paid linebacker in the NFL to the 3rd. So I'm pretty sure he would be very happy with that contract. That's really interesting. And to get those contract numbers, they're comparing them to the likes of Roquan Smith, Fred Warner, Tremaine Edmonds, and CJ Mosley. They put all of those guys into one big formula, and then the end result came out this $18.5 million per year over the course of 5 years. Now, I think Patrick Queen is really good, but I wouldn't put him up there with Roquan Smith, Fred Warner, Tremaine Edmonds, and CJ Mosley. Maybe he's like the tier below those guys. Again, he's still really good, but he's not those guys. So when typically when Spot Track does their contract predictions, their market values and things like that, they tend to have a couple of guys that's better than the guy that we're projecting and a couple of guys that may be a little bit worse, but they just straight up threw 4 people out there that were better than him, in my personal opinion. Of course, he has a ceiling to him, we'll see. But let's go ahead and also talk about the fact that the Commanders, I mean, we saw a report that they will be very active in free agency, but it seemed more so from things that Adam Peters has said that they'll more so spread the wealth amongst a lot of free agent signings rather than signing like a couple of guys to big money. A lot of guys, small money, rather than a small amount of guys to big money. But if we're really targeting Patrick Queen, would that mean that he could potentially end up being like the one big free agency signing that we actually go through with? And just say we did sign him for that $18.5 million. And again, that's kind of a lot. Like, in my opinion, I don't know. That's a lot of money. And I like Patrick Queen a lot. And we're going to talk about soon how I think his best days are ahead of him potentially. But that's a lot of money. But either way, what's crazy is that you can literally sign him for $18.5 million. And that would drop us all the way from number 1 in NFL cap space just the number 2. That's it. It's really crazy how much cap space we have. You can sign Patrick Queen and make him the 3rd highest paid linebacker in the NFL, and you would still be 2nd in the NFL in cap space, only behind the Tennessee Titans. The Patriots were up there at number 1 for like a week. Then they dropped down to like number 2. Now they're number 3. I'm not exactly keeping track of what free agency moves they're making, but for some reason they went from number 1 to number 3 in a matter of like 2 weeks. So the Tennessee Titans, if we were to sign a Patrick Queen to that large amount of money, we would still have the 2nd most cap space in the NFL, which is actually really amazing. So that does kind of put it into perspective, like maybe they will actually do this to be able to sign a top linebacker out of the free agency market and still have the 2nd most cap space in the NFL. It's kind of like, I mean, what do you really lose money wise? Like, I mean, now you have a really good, dependable linebacker, and you still have the money to go do everything else you planned on doing in free agency. Because if other teams can do it, with you having the 2nd most cap space in the NFL, you should also be able to do it. It's not like because other teams in the NFL are 16th or 20 something in cap space, they're just not going to sign guys. They're going to find a way to sign guys. So if we have the 2nd most cap space after signing a Patrick Queen, why wouldn't we be able to still continue to sign more guys? So that's just how the NFL works. It's all relative, basically. But I'm not even about to sit here in dreamland and just straight up lie to y'all and try to clickbait y'all or anything like that, acting like us getting Patrick Queen is just very likely to happen and destined to happen. Even though CBS Sports predicts us to land him, Jeremy Fowler reported that apparently Patrick Queen, Jadeveon Clowney, and Geno Stone could all end up following former Ravens defensive coordinator Mike McDonald to the Seattle Seahawks, where he is now the head coach. Based on conversations with sources, Fowler believes that in order of likelihood, we could see Quinn, Clowney, and or Stone join the Seahawks. So he, again, in order of likelihood, he has Patrick Queen as the most likely, Jadeveon as the 2nd, and then Stone as the 3rd. And NFL Draft Files brings up a great point. Seattle has never been a team that really just stops and completely rebuilds. They tend to try to reload and not like really go into like a rebuilding period of taking a step back, maybe only winning a couple of games. Nah, they're like, nah, we're trying to compete for a playoff every single season, no matter what. But you can argue that perpetual average, instead of just taking the time to do a full rebuild, is the reason that they have not been even anywhere near close back to the Super Bowl ever since the last time they went. But that's a discussion for another day. So, does us signing Patrick Queen actually make a lot of sense? Who knows? I mean, that Ravens report right there from Jeremy Fowler about them going to the Seattle Seahawks makes a lot of sense. But if we do actually end up getting them, I think it would help our linebacker room out a lot. If anything, he's just a really good proven player that comes in with a lot of confidence. But to me, the only concern that I would have with him is that he was never really playing at a very high level until my Georgia dog was next to him. Is he dependent on Roquan Smith to be great and consistent, or has something just finally clicked for him and he's ready to basically leave the nest now and he's ready to take off and do his own thing, even separate from Roquan Smith? Because I mean, he is only 24 years old and he's been getting better and better each season since he's been drafted. But again, he made a pretty big leap after the Ravens went and got Roquan Smith. So do we owe it to his development, his coaching, his work ethic and things like that, or is it more Roquan Smith? Maybe it's a healthy blend of all of those factors, but I'm just hoping and I'm questioning that if he separates from Roquan Smith, will he still be a Pro Bowl caliber linebacker? And honestly, I mean, with Dan Quinn as our head coach, Joe Wood Jr. as our defensive coordinator, and Ken Norton Jr. as our linebackers coach, if anybody could get Pro Bowl linebacker out of him, it's that group of people. Like, other than his former defensive coordinator and Mike McDonald going to the Seattle Seahawks, or if he just re-signs with the Ravens and continues to play next to Roquan Smith, other than those two potential options for him, I think we could honestly be one of the teams that could get the most out of him with the coaching staff that we have present. I think we have the coaching staff that can get him closer to his ceiling than most NFL coaching staffs out there. That's why I'm so excited about what the Commanders are doing as far as how they built this front office and coaching staff, because I have the utmost optimism that this coaching staff will be able to develop him really well, get him on track, again, even separate from Roquan Smith, just because of the proven development throughout this coaching staff, especially specifically with linebackers, which is just crazy because we had two coaches, our head coach and our defensive coordinator last year, that both played linebacker in college, and we did not develop linebackers. It's just crazy. But speaking of the big leap that I was talking about, again, let's go to Pro Football Focus. He had a 29.7 grade his rookie season in 2020. Then he had a 43.5 in 2021. Neither are good. But then he made this huge leap in 2022 with a 69.7 grade. And notice the difference there. That's when Roquan Smith joined the Ravens. And then in 2023, he had a 73 grade. So again, he's made steady improvement every year since he's been drafted. But there's a huge leap going from 2021 to 2022. And the biggest difference there was Roquan Smith as well. You know what else happened in 2022 that wasn't there in 2021? Mike McDonald went from Michigan's defensive coordinator to the Ravens defensive coordinator. So that also adds a question. Is Patrick Queen dependent on Roquan Smith and or Mike McDonald to be successful? Who knows? But again, with the coaching staff that we have here, I would be pretty confident in their ability to get a lot of greatness out of him, even separate from Mike McDonald and Roquan Smith. But at the same time, based on their grades, Pro Football Focus seems to think that both of those guys are benefiting from each other when it comes to Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith. Because Pro Football Focus had Roquan Smith graded as a 77.9. That's 15th out of all NFL linebackers last season. Patrick Queen is 24th with a 73, which is not bad at all. Like, I mean, they're basically almost in the same tier according to Pro Football Focus. They felt like Patrick Queen was better than Eric Kendricks, better than Levante David, better than Anthony Walker, Isaiah Simmons, Drew Tranquil, our Jamin Davis, Zach Cunningham, Jerome Baker. A lot of really notable linebackers out there. Devondre Campbell, our own commander, Cole Holcomb, Azeez Al-Shaair, a lot of notable names. So they feel like Patrick Queen was not only just really good because of Roquan Smith, but they would also probably argue, based on these grades, that Roquan Smith was able to do what he does because he had Patrick Queen next to him. But who knows? It's one of those film things. If we presume, I'm assuming that Adam Peters, Dan Quinn, Joe Wood Jr., all of those guys did all of this film study they could do, did all of the research they could do, probably crunched some of the numbers with Eugene Shin, and came up with the answer that yes, we want Patrick Queen. We believe we can do this with them. We can get this out of them. Let's get it. And if that's what they decide to do, I'm all for it. I've given you the positives. I've given you the negatives, all of that. Let's do it, man. And then moving on, There's a rumor that Texans defensive end Jonathan Grenard, who had 12.5 sacks this past season, is likely entering free agency per Marino NFL. Teams like the Browns and the Eagles could be spots to watch, but there's still also a chance that Houston brings him back. And man, please don't. Apparently the Houston Texans are prioritizing their DBs because they re-signed DBs Eric Murray and Desmond King, and then they're letting Jonathan Grenard walk. So I guess they prioritize these guys, or maybe it's because they're potentially cheaper or whatever. They went ahead and got those things done. It's not like the Texans are asleep. They got those signings done, and they're reportedly going to let Jonathan Grenard at least test free agency. Of course, they would love to get him back, but hey man, Commanders, let's go ahead and swoop in and try to get him. Now, speaking of edge rushers, the Commanders are more so in the business of gaining draft picks, not giving them away. So I do not predict us to try to trade for any of the franchise tagged edge rushers like a Brian Burns or a Josh Allen. Even though they are reportedly going for cheap trade value wise, I don't expect the Commanders to be interested though. I really don't. I know that there's a report that Brian Burns could potentially go for like a 3rd round pick. That report came out, and then it felt like there was a slice of hope there. Like, only a 3rd round pick? Okay, but I still highly doubt it. So that's why a guy like Jonathan Grenard, who was not franchise tagged, or Bryce Huff from the Jets that was also not franchise tagged, makes a lot more sense for the Commanders than giving up a 3rd round pick and then still having to pay a Brian Burns. And that's best case scenario. 3rd round pick, I feel like, is where we start negotiations with him. So who knows with that situation. But again, Jonathan Grenard, yes please. We can get Jonathan Grenard and Patrick Queen in the same free agency. I'm good to go. And then of course we'll make a lot of lesser known free agency signings to fill out the roster, but to like that be our start, those can be our 2 headlining guys. Also give me like a center like Tyler Biadasz, and I would love like a Tyron Smith at tackle, man. But those 2 would be a great start. And then also, speaking of trades, the Dallas Cowboys have given wide receiver Michael Gallup permission to seek a trade. And I just told you that the Commanders are not in the business of giving away draft picks. If anything, they would want to gain more. Adam Peters has already said that even though they're going to be active in free agency, the main priority is to rebuild this team through the draft. He wants to bring in his own players directly from college and develop them, groom them here and things like that, rather than taking players from other teams. The only time that we may potentially target free agents from other teams are guys that we are already previously connected with, which is why I've done those big time breakdowns. Like I just did the defensive version of free agents that we're familiar with based on connections with the coaches that we brought in, the front office members that we brought in on the defensive side earlier, and I'm gonna do an offensive one later because that's big time. If you want to build through the draft, I mean, at the very least, like say a Justin Simmons, you drafted him when you were there with the Denver Broncos, so that's technically a free agent, but that's somebody you drafted yourself. Same thing with 49ers free agents from Adam Peters' point of view. A lot of those guys that he potentially drafted while he was there, since he's been with the 49ers, if they're a free agent, maybe he wants to bring them in. I see him prioritizing those type of free agents over just any random free agent that's out there, unless it's a guy that's just really that good, like a Jonathan Grenard or a Patrick Queen. But Michael Gallup, if they did want to actually use a late round draft pick to get a receiver, because we're going to need receivers, then Michael Gallup can make a lot of sense, but I don't really see it because, first of all, this wide receiver class is arguably the best position group in this entire draft, arguably one of the best receiving classes we've seen in a draft in many years, like top to bottom. It's not even just top heavy. There's so much depth. You can get a starting receiver probably like in the 5th round, like easily in this up. If you need receiver, this is the most beautiful draft for you, and we need receivers, man. Especially even if we were to re-sign Curtis Samuel, I still feel like we need some receiver depth. Even though Cliff Kingsbury has infused the run game and like playing quarterback under center more than like a typical air raid system does, and even though he utilizes tight ends more than the typical air raid system does, it's still an air raid system at its very core, and they want to deploy as many wide receivers as possible, and they also want to take as many deep shots as possible, or at the very worst, they have a lot of receivers acting like they're going for a deep shot just so they can lighten up the box so we can truly do what we want to do, which is run the ball right up the middle or throw something underneath to like a tight end or a slot receiver, anybody running a slant, whatever. So either way, these receivers are going to be running a lot, and they're going to have to come on and off the field very often. So we're going to need a lot of receivers that can actually contribute, that are going to be able to go in and out the game constantly, because Cliff Kingsbury is going to have these receivers running more than they've probably ever run before. Terry McLaurin is going to need a breather. Jahan Dotson is going to need a breather. And when those guys are on the sideline just for a little bit, somebody else that has a proven track record of producing, or at the very least a guy that we draft, a couple of guys that we draft that we feel like we can trust immediately, are gonna have to come in and be ready to produce for us and be a threat to a defense. Because if Terry McLaurin and or Jahan Dotson are on the sideline catching their breath, we still need a receiver that scares defenses deep down the field to where they're like, Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson on the sideline, we're not even going to worry about these receivers in here. So, all right, go ahead and stack the box, because there's no way they're taking a deep shot. We need receivers that are threats, even when Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson are outside of the game. And so maybe trading Michael Gallup could be that. But the problem is, what are we talking draft pick wise? Because even though he may be worth a fourth rounder or higher to other teams, for us, I just feel like, especially again with the way that this draft is looking, I just don't think it's worth giving up any pick for Michael Gallup. I love him, and this was a guy, if you go back to my mock drafts when he was coming out of college, I really wanted him. I was sick to my stomach when he went to our rivals, the Cowboys. That was one of the guys that I was willing to draft way higher than he ended up getting taken in the draft. I was sick to my stomach. So if anybody knows, y'all know that I love Michael Gallup, but giving up draft picks when we're trying to rebuild this team, especially through the draft in Adam Peters' eyes, not only do I not want to do that, as in Rico of Street Scores, but I also don't think it's a very realistic option for a guy like Adam Peters. If anything, they'll just go sign a guy in free agency, worst case scenario. But again, for reasons I've already explained, I feel like more so than anything else, we're going to draft quite a few receivers or bring in a bunch of undrafted free agents, something like that. I don't expect us spending a lot of capital, either free agency nor through the draft, on wide receiver. Also, moving on, it looks like Jacoby Brissett is probably going to end up leaving Washington, so we may be in the business of a veteran quarterback, because whether we draft a quarterback number 2 overall or not, we still need a veteran guy. And with Jacoby Brissett potentially leaving, it's time to start looking. So let's dive into it. Jeremy Fowler talked about backup quarterbacks. He said Jacoby Brissett remains an attractive option for teams as a QB2 or bridge starter. New England is expected to be in the mix there. The feeling among teams I've spoken to is the Broncos could roll with Jarrett Stidham, but bring in competition via free agency or the draft. Brissett, Darnold, and Jameis Winston would make a lot of sense in that regard. Tennessee will likely sign a backup, but might go with a second wave passer. Brandon Allen, a former Brian Callahan disciple, is a candidate, and watch for Locke in Carolina. He has strong ties to new coach Dave Canales. But when it comes to Jacoby Brissett specifically, especially now that New England has traded away Mac Jones, whatever quarterback they end up taking in this draft, it would be nice that if whichever quarterback they take is fairly raw, maybe potentially like a Drake May, who a lot of people will argue may not be ready to play week 1. You could have like a guy like Jacoby Brissett not only be your backup, but also be ready to start for you week 1 until potentially a guy like Drake May or maybe another quarterback that they could end up getting is ready to actually go out there and start for you. So Jacoby Brissett is a big market out there. And I think with there potentially being like a bidding war for him, I don't really see us potentially bringing him back. I don't think Adam Peters and Cliff Kingsbury are going to fight to keep Jacoby Brissett, especially since more than likely who we're taking at number 2, they more than likely believe that guy will be ready to go week 1. And Sam Howell will technically be able to compete for the starting quarterback job, but he'll be more so looked at as a backup going into training camp and all of that type of stuff. But it would still be nice to have a veteran quarterback on an extremely cheap contract, not the type of money that Jacoby Brissett's potentially about to get. Let's get somebody way cheaper that just in case if that rookie quarterback hurt or not ready, whatever, Sam Howell, as sporadic as he is, up and down he is, you have like a dependable guy in the room. And Jake Fromm does not count. I'm a Georgia Bulldog fan, but do not even mention Jake Fromm. I hope this organization moves on from him. He was great in the preseason. That was really fun, but nah, I'm good, man. And then also, cornerback Isaiah Oliver, who I just talked about in my defensive free agents that the Commanders are familiar with through the coaching staff and front office, that just made so much sense. That same guy that was with the 49ers last year, and not only did Dan Quinn draft them with the Falcons, Adam Peters signed them to the 49ers. So the connections were strong there, but he signed on a 1-year deal with the Jets. And it's actually reported through Nikki Javala that the Commanders has some interest in Oliver. So I was right. They were definitely targeting a guy like that with the strong connections. He's cheap. They're looking for veteran cornerback options that just like some little depth pieces, some at the very least camp bodies right now, but at least some guys that they can trust when in doubt if there's an injury or if somebody's not fitting the scheme as well as they hope while they're trying to put in this new defensive scheme with an entirely new roster going from Dallas to the Commanders and things like that, trying to see how Emmanuel Forbes fits, Benjamin St-Juste fits. They could have a guy that they know, okay, when in doubt, like worst case scenario, we could depend on this guy to contribute for us and play some snaps if we need him to. Isaiah Oliver was literally that, but apparently the Jets went ahead and swooped them up before the Commanders did, which is really interesting, man. I really wish we would have had a guy like that. Of course, he wasn't like a big name. It's not like, oh yeah, we got Isaiah Oliver, we can celebrate, but I felt like that was going to be like a very underrated, dependable signing that would have the very least raised the floor in our cornerback group right now that has a lot of youngins in it right now, man. A lot of little pups in there. Because I don't think that we're going to re-sign Kendall Fuller. First of all, how much money he's asking for, I just highly doubt they meet that price. And also, he's not a great fit. They want athletic risk takers at the cornerback position. And now, granted, Kendall Fuller has been our best interception corner for the past couple of years, but I don't think he necessarily fits the mold of like a Trevon Diggs or Deron Bland that are faster and quicker like an Emmanuel Forbes does. So I don't know, man. It's not looking too good for us right now in the cornerback group. But of course, with Joe Witt Jr., Jason Simmons as defensive passing game coordinator, I trust those guys to come in and get the most out of these guys that we already have. But boy, it's time to hit that market and see what we can do. And I'm also expecting us to draft corner within the first 3 rounds somewhere. Somewhere in that second, maybe third round, we're probably taking corner. Because you can argue that it's actually a bigger need than a lot of people think. And then lastly, before we get up out of here, I saw news that the Panthers are expected to release center Bradley Bozeman at the start of the league year. And boy, I was so relieved to remember that Ron Rivera is not our head coach. So this is not a guy that we have to worry about signing. Now watch me jinx it, and then for some reason Adam Peters, Dan Quinn, and Cliff Kingsbury as a combination actually want this guy. That would be insane. But just know that now that Ron Rivera is no longer our head coach, we're not assumed or at the very least predicted or highly likely to go pursue this guy. He's just another free agent that just happens to be available at technically a position that I feel like we need. But thank goodness the Ron Rivera curse is broken. We do not have to worry about bringing over Panthers players all of the time. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Again, I'm gonna say it for like what the 4th, 5th time this video. I just did the defensive free agents that the Commanders may target because of our familiarity with them. I'm working on the offensive one later on this evening / night. Again, the legal tampering period starts technically tomorrow, March 11th. So things are about to start clicking. We're about to start seeing those notifications. Technically, the new league year starts March 13th, but March 11th is when you start to see the more general signings, like the team A is hiring player Z to a 3-year contract worth this, and then it's like March 13th is when we start to see this much of it is roster bonus, this much of it is guaranteed, this much of it is incentives, all of that type of stuff. But March 11th, people start signing people. It's like an agreement in principle, and then pen to paper gets put down March 13th and more details come out and stuff like that. But just to let you know, within 24 hours the Commanders may be signing some free agents, y'all, so don't sleep. I'm gonna keep y'all updated on every little information, every little piece of news. I don't care what I'm doing. I could be working on another video, a potential like prediction video type of thing, and then if I see that we sign somebody, I'm stopping everything that I'm doing to record that, give y'all all of that information, all of my opinions on it and everything, how much money they're making, how many years, all of the information that I have, and then we're just gonna keep moving on. So one-stop shop for everything. Commanders, stay tuned. I got y'all covered for everything for agency, so make sure y'all stay tuned for all of that. I really appreciate y'all. Stiff arm that like button on the way out, and of course let me know know in the comment section how you feel about everything discussed in this video. The Patrick Queen part of it, Jonathan Grenard, Michael Gallup, Jacoby Brissett, and do you agree with me that you feel like we do need at least some sort of a veteran quarterback just in case? So let me know how you feel about all of that. Do you want to sign any of the guys that I brought up? Are there any other potential guys that maybe we're connected to that I don't know about? Let me know in the comment section. I really want this to be like a complete Washington Commanders thread of all information, reports, and rumors that we have going on. So let's get this video going, man. I appreciate y'all. I'm gonna catch y'all later. I'm out.